So hello, everyone, and thanks for coming out today, and welcome to our session on science communication initiatives at academic societies. My name is Tayllor Stumpe, and I work closely with our society partners in the US on their research communication and public outreach initiatives. We've got a great panel of speakers today, starting with Olivia Ambrogio. Olivia manages the Sharing Science program at the American Geophysical Union. As a biologist herself, she's recognized both the importance of sharing science in a way that's effective, compelling, and accessible to other audiences, and the difficulty in doing so. She's moved into the field of science communication precisely in order to help other scientists talk about what they do in a way that can matter to anyone and everyone. Olivia conducts lots of workshops and webinars and develops online resources to support scientists in doing all of that. She's also continues her own SciComm work by doing a variety of informal outreach about marine biology and animal behavior through her own science writing and science drawings. And then next we'll have Meagan Phelan. At AAAS, Meagan oversees efforts to boost the visibility of forthcoming studies from the 6 science family journals to 6,000 plus reporters worldwide. Prior to joining AAAS in 2013, she served as a senior writer at AIR Worldwide, where she interacted with scientists and engineers to communicate advances in wind engineering, seismology, climate science, and other fields. Previously, she was a science writer at the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Meagan holds a bachelor's degree in biology and Spanish from Gettysburg College and a master's degree in science writing from the Johns Hopkins University. In 2008, Meagan received a Fulbright scholarship to work with Dr. Juan Antonio Raga at the University of Valencia to help determine and communicate the cause of morbillivirus resurgence among small cetaceans in the Mediterranean. So I'd like to welcome my 2 panelists, but before we get started, we were going to ask the audience some questions on their general communication habits at the society level and what kind of audiences are most critical for your society to engage with for enhanced visibility of your research. So in just 1 second, I will release that poll. Oh, we've got some interesting initiatives. So a lot of people are using social media for communication activities with their organizations, as well as press releases. And then the second question is, out of these target audiences, which are most critical for your society to engage with? And that can be peers, which is society members, researchers outside and inside the discipline, the general public, press, media outlets, policymakers, or even just practitioners within your society. So it's looking like a little bit of a mixed bag so far. So a lot of it's peers that are just co-researchers, inside and outside the discipline, but I'm also seeing increase in the public, which is really good because it's really important for the public to understand the science that societies are putting forward. And then we have one more. And are there science communication programs for members in place at your society or organization? Yes or no? And this will help us gauge some of the society experience before we start diving in with our panelists. All right, so it's looking at about like 60-40, 60% yes, no, but now it's kind of going a little 50-50, so that's really interesting to see. Well, just based on a lot of these results, it's quite evident that just getting your research published is not the end of the research life cycle, but just the beginning of the road for wider visibility and change. And the need for public engagement with science is strong, and the role that societies play in this process is really significant. And something almost all societies have in common is their aim to further enhance the direction of their research discipline, and they do so by developing the community surrounding them. So in an article I read in Learned Publishing stated that societies primarily exist for 3 main reasons, and that's to promote understanding in their field, to encourage interaction among people, and using both of those to use that resulting knowledge for the common good. And these aims can only be fulfilled if societies provide members with tools for personal development and settings where they can implement their expertise. And while this movement starting to be accepted, researchers are increasingly being encouraged to communicate their research not only with their peers, but with the public to influence local and federal policymakers. However, while a public science communication movement is being encouraged, this does not mean that researchers and society members are necessarily comfortable expanding their technical communication habits. And this could be just from publishing in a journal, presenting their research at a conference. And academic societies, as a result of this, they've been developing public outreach programs with resources, toolkits, and professional guidance for their members to engage with the public audience. So we have this visual from the AAAS Center for Public Engagement with Science and Technology. And this basically just shows that the public consumes research in the opposite direction of how the research community presents it. And this is important when communicating findings to the press and the general public populations, because you'll need to tailor your messaging for the end audience to accurately consume it. So today we'll be taking a look at all the activities AGU and AAAS and taking a deeper look into the science communication and public outreach programs open to members and practitioners in their communities. In this session, the audience will gain a familiarity of science communication movements of societies today and the need to communicate science with non-traditional peers, the public, and policymakers. And also just taking a look at the strategies that societies are implementing that are actively influencing public awareness of research. So on that note, I'd like to hand the mic over to Olivia to talk about her experience managing the Sharing Science program at the American Geophysical Union and the impact that their member community has experienced learning to communicate to various audiences.
Thanks for the introduction and the invitation to be involved today. I'm really excited about it. So yes, I just want to present all of you today with a quick sort of overview of the Sharing Science program at AGU. And first, let me tell you a little bit. You probably are already familiar with AGU, but in case you're not, so it is the largest scientific society for Earth and space scientists. It has about 60,000-ish members worldwide and supports a community of more than 130,000, everyone from experts to the science-interested public around the world. We have 22 journals, a great deal of topical conferences, and are probably best known for the huge conference that we have fall meeting every December, where in recent years we've had between 25,000 and 28,000 attendees. Obviously, we'll be looking at a slightly different model moving forward, but certainly that has a large impact on the community at large. AGU's Sharing Science program is designed to help scientists not do what the one in this drawing is doing. I drew this cartoon as the result of some sad personal experiences while I was in grad school, not realizing that just because you know your science is interesting, that doesn't mean that others will automatically realize that as well. So a lot of what we do in the program is to find scientists who are interested in communicating more broadly. And this has been a wider and wider swath of scientists. I've noticed this growing trend, as I'm sure many of you have as well over the years. And we give them skills, support, resources, and also the confidence to then go out and communicate with wider audiences, whether that's policymakers, journalists, educators, and students, or members of the public. And so that's both what they do on that they're motivated to do on their own, and we try to provide them with some opportunities to do that as well. And we do this through a variety of ways, from workshops, webinars. We have a variety of online resources, including our Twitter account, which is both a platform for this community, but also shares a lot of the social science around science communication. Our website has a number of toolkits and resources. And again, we try to provide outreach opportunities and as much hands-on support as possible. So how did Sharing Science come to be as a program? Well, once upon a time, an extremely large scientific society underwent a major millennium overhaul to try to better connect what it was doing with society, because so much of the science that was being done by AGU members has an influence on society, but not necessarily was not necessarily recognized as such. And there were a number of small activities that were not small, I should say, discrete activities that were being done at AGU. So, for example, for a while, we've had our public affairs team, which is the government relations department, essentially has supported scientists in communicating with legislators and going on congressional visits, for example. We had some support for climate communication training and some support for scientists talking to journalists, a little bit of support helping scientists talk with broader public audiences or students. But it was all sort of spread out and diffuse. And so when I came in around 8 years ago, this was when we were really trying to develop all of this into a cohesive program, which became Sharing Science. And I should say that I manage the department, but the program itself and its goals stretches across many departments and divisions at AGU. So a little bit about what we provide for members in terms of our workshops. We have done a number of workshops in a number of places, and typically institutions can request one or two of us to come and give an all-day workshop on a variety of topics related to science communications, very interactive. We've done this at a lot of different institutions and at different conferences around the country, usually around 10 to 12 a year. And we do some evaluations at the time to kind of find out what's working, what's not, a little bit to see how we can follow up with the people who are involved there. And then obviously we offer a lot of opportunities at fall meeting for those who either don't have the opportunity at their own institution to get engaged in this or don't have the time unless they're at fall meeting. And again, we've seen this trend of increased interest among scientists in science communication. So each year we're seeing an increase in the number of participants in these activities. What do these workshops involve? A lot of different things. Often we have sort of the fundamentals of SciComm, where we're really focusing on the value and importance of knowing your audience and knowing how to connect in a meaningful way with that audience, which is just critical for all science communication. How to reduce jargon, how to develop compelling messages. We also have some that focus more specifically rather than just touching upon policy or media audiences, how to develop multimedia products around sharing science, how to tell stories around science, use social media, or how to work interdisciplinarily. So how to communicate your science more broadly, even if your purpose is not necessarily to connect with the wider public, but to connect with scientists in other spheres. And, I just want to point out another trend that we've really seen, which is that all of the workshops and programming that we offer around multimedia has been immensely popular. This is a photo from a couple of years ago of a How to Sketch Your Science workshop that we hosted at fall meeting. And I mean, it was even more packed this past year when we held it. So we've really tried to increase the resources that we provide in that area because so many people are interested in it. And again, as I mentioned, we recognize that not everybody can attend an all-day workshop, and we try to provide a lot of stuff in the online realm as well. Certainly now, no one can attend an all-day workshop in person, so we're definitely bulking that up. In fact, we have our first of our webinar series for this year this afternoon. So this is one of two for me today. So online, we provide a lot of different guidelines. We provide archived webinars. We have a lot of these. You can see on the right these little images. These are one-page printable toolkits that we provide on a variety of different subjects, from is my study likely to be newsworthy, to some general tips for communication, to how to develop a plain language summary. In the back of each of these have sort of a worksheet that you can go through should you want to develop your skills and thinking in this area. And then I mentioned before that we also try to provide some options to directly help scientists engage with other audiences. So again, the Public Affairs Department runs these congressional visits days where they train scientists and then take them to congressional offices in Washington, D.C. This year, they're doing an online advocacy days event, so also doing the training and helping scientists connect with legislators in that realm, even when they can't do it in person. And we've also connected members of our Sharing Science community with journalists more directly by working with our Media Relations Department, sort of our press office, and connecting them with members of our Sharing Science community who already have experience talking with journalists and who have expertise in a variety of relevant fields. So when hurricane season starts, for example, our Media Relations Department can put out a press release saying, hey, you can contact these scientists to, should you need background or more information around hurricane-related science, or should some natural disaster occur, hey, we have all of these people you can talk to about wildfires or about volcanoes, and here's their information. And another really critical component for us of sharing science is to create community. Because so often, scientists who are engaged in science communication at their institutions are not necessarily, they might not be finding as much resistance to it as they used to among their peers. But we've definitely noticed that they're not seeing a lot of other people who are really excited about it at the same institutions. And so they can often feel really alone. Through the Sharing Science community, which provides an online platform where we share a lot of resources and opportunities and information and examples, but where they can also talk to one another, it allows for a wider community, for people who are engaged in this work to not feel so alone and to recognize that there are other people who want to support them and lift them up as well. And we've been doing this in a more intensive way through our Voices for Science initiative. This is now in its third year. We just sort of started the third year in April of this year. And we've been able to we have two tracks, policy and then communications media track of individuals, but they're mostly together. And we've been able to increase this by year from 30 the first year to 40 total individuals this year. And so we provide them with some training and let them get to know each other and have monthly calls where we're checking in with them in regional teams. And they are committed to doing at least one engagement action per month. And usually they do a lot more. They also have the opportunity to be eligible for microgrants from AGU for some of the outreach work that they do. And this has been extremely popular and very effective. So in just our first two cohorts have engaged in over 1,300 outreach activities, directly engaged with over 25,000 people, and indirectly engaged with over 8.3 million people, whether that's been through online engagement or through people watching TV programs they've been interviewed for or listening to radio segments, etc. And these activities have ranged from creating inclusive science communication conferences to giving public talks to being on widely spread podcasts to inviting legislators to their institutions. And what's also been very satisfying is that we've seen the importance and value of this for our advocates in the program. Part of it has just been through finding community. So being able to really see that there are others out there who also care about this work and who can inspire them with the kinds of outreach that they're doing. They've also been able to develop more confidence and a sense of identity as being someone who does outreach, as being someone who has a role as an advocate for science. And finally, a number of people have said that because this program is through AGU and they're recognized in that way, they feel that it gives them some legitimacy that they were often lacking in their SciComm work at their home institutions. So that's been really gratifying as well. Okay, I've said all of this, but why does this matter? I mean, why are we bothering with the Sharing Science program apart from employing me, which I'm grateful for? But, why does AGU see this as so important? Why should scientists themselves be supported in sharing what they do? Well, from a societal perspective, it's something of a no-brainer, right? This is critically important. We know that there are huge differences in understanding and opinion between members of the public who are scientists and those who are not. And when you can help people with scientific expertise engage in a respectful and meaningful way with wider audiences, then you're starting to close those gaps. Also, most people can't name a living scientist. And they don't know that maybe their neighbor or the person down the street or someone at the local university is in fact a scientist. When you don't know anyone, there's no sense of humanizing the field. Also, people think that all scientists are old white guys in lab coats. That's simply not helpful to support those who are already working in science or to inspire the next generation. From a more tangible perspective for scientists, well, it's a great value for funding. To get funding if you know how to communicate well. If you develop a plain language summary, as many journals, including AGU journals, encourage or require you to do, the editor-in-chief who is initially looking over that, who may not have an expertise in your field, is going to better understand the value of your paper to pass it on to those reviewers who are experts. Broader impact sections of grant proposals are critically important. You need to be able to do those in a substantial and meaningful way. If you want to collaborate more and more grants and more cutting edge science is interdisciplinary. If you want to be able to work with scientists in other fields, you also need to be able to communicate clearly in a way that is beyond what you're used to doing. You get a much wider dissemination of your work. And of course, Meagan is going to talk about this in much more detail in her section. But when scientists' work is published in the news, it's going to be read by many, many more people than those who are reading just the journal that it's published in. You'll see increases in citations. More and more research is showing that when scientists are active on social media, especially Twitter, which has a huge scientific presence, they're actually getting more citations because scientists in their general area of study who might not have read their papers will see them on social media and then go and find their papers. Scientists who do this have a renewed enthusiasm for what they're doing. You know, you're revising a manuscript for the 4th time, or you're dealing with some setup that didn't work properly, and you think, why didn't I go into carpentry instead of science, right? But when scientists are talking with others about why they find science valuable, what it means, why they're excited about it, then they remember why they're excited about it too. And finally, more and more organizations, particularly scientific societies like AAAS and AGU, are working hard to acknowledge and recognize and, as best we can, reward the really incredible science communication work that our members are doing. And that is then being passed on to their institutions. Scientists that we know have said that they've seen a change in how those around them treat their science communication when they see that it's valued by institutions like AGU. And we do see a wider impact for all of this work that we do as well. So just a couple of examples from the policy realm. So when we reach out to scientists asking them to ask their legislators to sign on to science-relevant letters or bills, they do. And then we see that the legislators also themselves sign on. Not universally, but here are a couple of examples of when that happened. Also, a scientist who was trained in our policy track of Voices for Science and had a real sense of confidence, too, from having done that, reached out to one of the Democratic candidates in the presidential campaign and said, hey, do you have any need for me? I have these expertise. I'd be happy to work with you. And was actually taken on as an advisor. So science is really informing policy in a whole new way. I don't have the numbers of actual articles that have come from our journals via the press releases that our media relations department does, although I know there are many. But another example of how this work has an impact is that when researchers collaborate with AGU on little videos about the research, we sometimes get millions of views. And in one case, it was actually picked up by Stephen Colbert on The Late Show. It's a pretty fun clip if you have time to look at it. So we know that not only is there value in it, but we're actually seeing the effects of our support of science communication. Thank you very much. And I'll let Meagan take it away.
All right, thank you, Olivia. And it's really great to see all the activities going on at AGU and just especially emphasizing on the point of community. I mean, you have this community of like-minded people coming together in Earth and space science, and I think that could be really valuable taking science communication ahead. So next, we'll open up the floor for Meagan to talk about her experience bridging the gap between researchers and the press, as well as the impact that these activities have had on boosting the visibility of research studies from AAAS's science family of journals.
Okay, so I have about 20 minutes here. Thanks to Olivia, including for sharing so succinctly why sharing science is so important and about all the terrific related AGU programs. I'm Meagan Phelan. I'm the Executive Director of the Science Press Package, or SciPac, as we call it. We support the science family journals, which are published by the American Association for the Advancement of Science. We're the world's largest interdisciplinary science society. So normal times we're headquartered in DC, but today I'm reporting to you from my attic. So as we deal with all of this in these remote times. I thought it was great to see in the audience survey that Tayllor offered at the start of this event that people are using news releases and social media to communicate science, that you're focused on helping science reach other scientists and the public, and that about half of you are already communicating science to your organization. I'm also excited I might have quite a bit to share, not only with that group, but to the other half who I think said, you're not doing science communication so much right now at your organization. I've been at AAAS in science for 7 years. I really love what I do there because I'm highly motivated by the organization mission and by extension, the mission that supports our journal. So the mission at AAAS is to advance science for the betterment of all people. And a really important goal within this space is enhancing communication among scientists in different disciplines and among scientists and the public. AAAS has several different programs that are similar to those AGU offers that Olivia already described. So as not to overlap with her discussion of those, I'm going to talk a little bit about AAAS's similar offerings today, but I really focus on the mechanics that my team, the Science Press Package team, uses to help scientists reach the press. I think these are actionable in different ways for journal publishers of all sizes. And though there's no one recipe for doing them, what we've been trying has really led to success on our team. I'm excited to share more about it. So by the end of this talk, you'll know a little bit more about AAAS programs and efforts to train scientists to communicate to different audiences, including religious audiences and policymakers, to name a few. But again, to offer something different than Olivia covered, I'm going to spend most of the presentation on how my team serves hundreds of global journal paper authors every year to help them reach reporters on papers that include more basic research. And I'll also talk about the impacts that authors report that this gains them. So first, what are some of the initiatives that AAAS offers, similar to AGU? Because we too, like AGU, believe in the impact that communicating science has to society. On the left-hand side here, you see several programs listed. First is the Center for Public Engagement, which offers dozens of workshops around the country, training scientists at academics and private institutions in how to communicate outside their fields and with other scientists, with policymakers, in op-eds, on social media, during controversial interviews, and much more. DOSER, the Dialogue on Science, Ethics, and Religion, a program started at AAAS in 1995, focuses on improving communication between scientific and religious audiences. They've actually helped our Center for Public Engagement create a very popular workshop specifically tailored to communicating science to religious groups. And that's a workshop that's been held at the AGU conference that Olivia mentioned. The next three AAAS centers and efforts listed on the left side of that slide: Center for Scientific Evidence in Public Issues, AAAS's advocacy at the federal and local levels. These all help put scientists in contact with policymakers on issues important at state level or at the federal level. They're trying to ensure that new research is folded into decision-making, a lot of what Olivia already talked about. SciLine, the penultimate bullet there, that's a program that was just started a few years ago in recognition that a lot of reporters covering science now are being asked to do this as news desks shrink. So coming over from other beats with little science experience. It has an expert listing service that scientists can sign up to be a part of, which some of you may be interested to know more about. Finally, the Science Press Package is the team I head. We serve authors at all 6 family journals. We put them in direct contact with a global reporter network that is not general reporters so much, but largely beat science reporters. So what are some of the recent initiatives that have worked well for these AAAS and science efforts? What are some of our success stories? 2 years ago, our Center for Public Engagement trained a cohort of infectious disease research to communicate about the importance of their work. I recently heard from one of them, a vaccine specialist at Baylor College, who said this training was the reason that she's been able to speak up now and be a ready resource during COVID times, including about vaccines. Per the second bullet at the AAAS Dialogue on Science, Ethics, and Religion program, there's a partnership with an association of theological schools known as Science for Seminaries. This is AAAS's program. It provides these seminaries with a number of resources to build science into at least 2 courses each semester. They've just had 8 new seminaries enroll. That continues to be a great success. In February, as part of national level science communication and advocacy, AAAS hosted a summit for mayors and city council members from across the country to talk about what we know about chemicals in drinking water. Experts were invited to present. The idea is to give civic leaders more information to inform their policy so it's as evidence-based as possible. This spring, as part of not federal but local level advocacy efforts, the AAAS Local Science Engagement Network hosted an event in Colorado. It brought together scientists, civic leaders, local and state policymakers to talk about how to make policies about clean energy more sustainable. In recent weeks, Sciline has really turned its focus to helping reporters who typically don't cover science, but now are covering COVID. They've held a series of webinars on different aspects of COVID-19 that have been very well attended. There's clearly a need for this from the reporters who are being asked to turn on a dime and cover this novel pandemic. And finally, and this is where I will deviate from the focus of Olivia's talk, the science press package team at AAAS provides lay summaries of forthcoming research, related multimedia, transcripts, translations, and more for papers we're about to publish under embargo. We've had to work very quickly during COVID times because we, probably like many other publishers and some of you here, are committed to a Wellcome Trust rapid data sharing agreement. And we've had some real success at communicating research on coronavirus in a non-hyped way, including for 2 papers we published yesterday that were top trending on Twitter last night. And I'll talk more about those later. So I'd like to focus right now on the science press package team and how we do our work. And I want to start by saying that there's no recipe for how to communicate science to press, but there are several things that continue to work well for my team week in and week out, including for more basic or preclinical research, which maybe is what some of you are publishing more of. Today, I want to share a few of our strategies. I think these are actionable regardless of how well resourced your press office may be, how big it is, or if it exists at all. I do want to stop before I get into talking about this, just to allow you to think about what success looks like for you as a publisher of scientific content at your journal or your organization. Because for me, what I know is that my team at AAAS in Science exists because of the organization's philosophy about publishing. We believe that publishing in the journal doesn't end with accept. Accept actually marks the beginning of a whole new process to communicate scientists' work with public audiences. Again, we've had a lot of success supporting our 6 journals. There's a whole team that makes this possible. Let's take a look at what that looks like. The Science Press Package team every week is reaching a network of 6,000 reporters. We are staffed by 5 science writers whose goal is to read new papers and really articulate how they are different from others in the same field, how they advance their field. This is especially important for beat reporters covering research in crowded spaces like CRISPR and ancient DNA. We have 4 communications associates who involve authors and their press officers in this process. We support 6 journals through 5 online press packages, which are on the news site Eureka Alert. So what do these press packages look like? Here's a snapshot on the left-hand side of the beginnings of some summaries and our press package for the open access journal Science Advances. On the right-hand side, you see a news story about Himalayan glacier melt that covered one of the papers in that issue. As we are building our press packages, I mean, this is work that my team does 51 weeks out of the year. Can be quite a lot, a bit repetitive. I try to be cognizant to remind my staff of what's at stake here. Some of you may be familiar with AAAS's former CEO, Rush Holt. He was a scientist. He also spent many years in Congress. And he used to tell us that when he was in Congress, colleagues said that they read not the research itself, but the news pieces on the research. So for this reason, among others, including building public trust in science, we definitely want to help ensure that science is part of the news landscape, but we feel strongly about how that should look. We want reporters to cover the science right or not at all. And what do I mean by right? I mean avoiding hype, especially important, for example, now in the crowded coronavirus news landscape. And I mean ensuring that more basic research receives press attention. This is another kind of problem or issue in the science communication space. As one, again, COVID-related example, the work that molecular biologists have done for decades to understand transcription, for example, was key to the development of remdesivir, of different vaccine platform approaches being explored now, and more. We think these are really important stories for a public consuming science to understand more than is happening now. These problems, though, hype, basic research being overlooked, probably ones you're all familiar with. And on my team, there are some ways that we've developed to combat them that we see work well. Again, no recipe for this, but I do want to share what's worked for us. The efforts that we think about weekly as we approach new papers for any of our 6 journals are as follows. Big no to hype. Our press package summary titles and leads are crafted in a measured, responsible way. We do not overstate the results or their implications, or at least we try not to. Yes to context. We very clearly articulate how a study advances what's been done in its field, even if others have done very similar work in recent weeks, and maybe especially so. And we also convey if the implications of the work are near or distant. Yes to limitations. We are quick to call out a sample size or a study that has not yet been done in humans, or where follow-up research is needed to definitively answer a question, or where a finding that looks exciting now may actually not bear out in the long run. This is relevant to a COVID vaccine study I'll talk about later. So these problems about hype and basic science getting overlooked also lead to opportunities. Windows and doors, as we call them, that we try to open for authors. And these are the spaces where we are most active. And what are they? What are these things that we are trying to do to help scientists connect with press in ways they might not otherwise? So one of the things I ask all of my writers to do when they're communicating about a new piece of research is to get a one-line summation from the authors about how the study moves the field forward. Again, for an audience of beat reporters, it's particularly important that they can see very quickly how this latest CRISPR study advances over the one that they saw yesterday in Cell. Another thing, if authors feel convinced that their work won't be of interest, we come back and say, no, wait a minute, there might be some surprisingly newsworthy elements, as we call them, embedded in this study. Let's take a look. If we see those, we will often suggest that the authors take initiative and pitch a story about them, and maybe expand on them more than the paper would convey to an academic-led news site called The Conversation, which we find a very important unofficial partner. And if you aren't aware of it, it's a website to which authors, researchers can submit news stories that are then syndicated widely. So motivated by ever more reporters we survey who are telling us that they like to tell stories about the human side of scientists, we sometimes ask authors if they have any interesting personal stories about their work. Some have said things like, I was a lawyer but became interested in this scientific question, and I decided to become a scientist to explore it for this reason. These are things that reporters actually could make a story of. They're not in the paper, but by engaging with the author a little bit, and they're pretty good-natured about it, you can learn these things. Also motivated by reporters who say video and other visuals are differentiators in whether they'll cover a story. We recruit more of that. Video showing methods, place, experiments, the struggle, or infographics. Those are particularly good to illustrate complicated quantitative data. And finally, on this slide, when we've asked scientists to talk about the limitations of their work, how there's uncertainty, for example, but partly because it was hard to access a specific location and get more samples, that's led to interest and stories from reporters as well. On the next slide, I'm going to show a couple more examples of doors we try to open for authors who are wanting to connect with press, some of which are focused on post-publication public outreach as well. So a lot of this is about engaging actively in different ways, thinking creatively. Is this a local reporter issue? Are there other countries dealing with what this paper describes such that I should pitch it to Japan or Germany or Brazil? Are the implications a little more nuanced such that having a teleconference, which would allow for a rich Q&A going to be important to getting the findings right? Is this an important public health issue, an advance in vaccine science, for example, where public audiences would be really excited to connect? That's a great Facebook Live. These are all tactics we do. And of course, we think about social media as well and using hashtags in most of our posts. In the slide before this one, I mentioned that particularly for basic science, where scientists might say to us, nobody will care about this work, we say, wait a minute, there could be some truly newsworthy elements there. Let's take a look at let's take a look at the checklist that we give to scientists so they can think about whether these angles are embedded in their stories. This has been a really helpful framing tool for us. So here we go. I apologize, the text is a little small, but elements like the study including a new method or technology, or overturning a prevailing view, including an unusually large sample size, greatly impacting communities, representing a large international author group, intersecting with policy, being in a space where research hasn't been put forward in a while, being likely to be a surprise to another research group, directly informing applications, and including an interesting author personal story. All of these things are newsworthy to the reporters that we talk to. We actually published a study where the authors search for protein alterations in cells that give rise to medulloblastoma, identified a protein that could be a useful new drug target. I remember the authors thinking this work in mice wouldn't be of interest to the press, but we noticed it was especially collaborative. So we suggested that they pitched how that collaboration accelerated the pace of their work to the clinic, to the conversation. Again, this is a great news site to get to know if you don't already. And the conversation liked the story. It was published. It was syndicated to other outlets. That led to coverage at NBC Nightly News. And the study was discussed in the context of collaborations that facilitate drug development. So being mentioned in the nightly news like that is obviously kind of a holy grail of press coverage and traction. But that's just one among the impacts that authors who pitch to the conversation report to us. We really encourage them to pitch there because what we are hearing about authors who land stories on this site is that it leads to more interest from collaborators, more citations of their work, that it returns something that they can use in grant proposals, influences policymakers, leads to more interviews, and so on. And we've asked the conversation to report back to us on this data. This, again, is a great example of proactive outreach. I really like opportunities like that for authors, and I want to share another one on this slide. For the past few years, we've been doing Facebook Live events with authors, which include one training and then one official event. We've done them on AAAS programmatic content and on new papers. You can see some of the author feedback here, commenting on how this event actually led to collaborations with other scientists. A viewer commented that the quality of information we're bringing to the public was welcome. At that time, I remember the topic was vaccines. But as we've done Facebook Live, we've also heard about improvements we could be making from our public audiences. In particular, they wanted more foreign language content. And so that was a gap we recognized we needed to fill, and we did that with a Twitter account that now communicates breaking research. This has been particularly valued during COVID times, where Spanish language researchers, press officers, and reporters, of course, are saying this is a quality resource that we check every day. So we've done a lot at Science in the way of communicating about coronavirus now. I know that my time will end soon, so I will be quick in my remaining slides. But importantly, for all papers we've published since 19 February, when we published the cryo-EM structure of the viral spike protein, we've issued very clear summaries of these works, how they move the field forward, what the limitations are. We've held teleconferences about modeling papers. We've held Facebook Lives about how structure informs vaccine design. We highlight our research on social media, and we share it with policymakers. I want to now share something pretty cool, some numbers about traction on one COVID study that really stood out. If you're all familiar with altmetrics, if you see these numbers and think, oh, they're pretty big, you'll be right. So in mid-April, we published a paper showing social distancing may need to be maintained intermittently into 2022. We immediately recognized its message as complicated, so we notified reporters as it was published that we'd hold a teleconference 2 hours later. We had over 70 reporters, and the way that they re-asked similar questions really showed how important it was for the authors to have that chance to engage and answer in different ways. But the paper has been picked up, as you can see, by nearly 550 outlets. And in this space, coronavirus research, one of the things you all may be thinking about, I know we are, is the rapid flow of information, including on preprints. I know at Science, we have a lot of authors who post to a preprint first and then come to us at the journal, which was true for this modeling paper. We want to understand what that visibility difference is at these two stages, between the preprint and us. We've had access to the authors, so we've asked them. And here's some feedback from the authors on that mid-April paper I just highlighted to you. They, I think these feedbacks, which talk about the massive expansion of visibility and the ushering of this dialogue into policy discussions, are representative of what we're seeing from other authors as well. So these are also things I make sure my team can see so they feel connected to the impact that they're having in our mission, especially right now while we're managing or working remotely. I think feeling connected is especially important. Last week, I heard from another coronavirus research paper author. She talked about how right after publication, she was contacted by funders and organizations like Gates, Pew, and WHO, and she has had more public policy pickup than she could have imagined. I do want to emphasize that pickup alone, as I've alluded to a little bit before, is not our sole metric of success. We want the research to be covered accurately. Slate has just started a new series where they look at science articles on COVID that went viral and weren't communicated well, which presumably is not only something for journalists to consider, but also a result of work by teams like mine. I mean, it makes us think, could we be doing our job better? I checked out the series yesterday for the first time. I was very relieved no science family studies are there yet. And something else I saw encouraging yesterday was that 2 studies we published at 10 a.m. With very clear communication about study limitations since they were in macaques were top trending on Twitter by the evening. What was best of all that was that the Twitter summary, and I'm not sure if you can see it, included a caveat for the public. More research is needed to determine if immunity, the immunity that they found in these vaccinated macaques upon re-challenge, also applies to humans. That's expectation setting for the public. We will be surveying these authors soon, as we do about 1 week after publication for all authors, to ask them their impressions of the accuracy of the media coverage and about impacts. We hope their responses might include any of the following, that they have earned how they reached outlets in and beyond the U.S., got more media coverage than they expected, earned accurate media coverage, that they got a chance to clarify misconceptions, perhaps about how vaccines are developed, that they connected with new collaborators, influenced policymakers, were invited to talk to leaders on the topic, and maybe got to lead meetings with officials to make decisions about the work. And with that, I will turn it back to Tayllor. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, I'm back. Well, thank you, Meagan, for sharing some of those slides. Definitely a lot of good questions and observations were coming up in the comments. And I think it's really clear that, communicating with the press is truly a key avenue to engaging with the general public. And it's really fascinating to see all the factors and metrics that you've presented, and especially coming from a multidisciplinary organization like AAAS. So we've got a few minutes left for some audience questions. So the first question was a follow-up from Meagan's presentation, and it's basically, how do you choose these articles to promote? I mean, what kind of steps go into that, and what kind of recommendations would you give to someone with a subject in a niche area to promote their research to the press?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think right now we are thinking about this most at Science Advances, which is our open access journal, which has gone from publishing 2 papers in its first issue in 2015 to publishing 50 papers a week. So we try to schedule calls with the editors at the journals on reasonable schedule and ask them about the bleeding edges of their fields and which research, including basic research, is supporting trends in those fields. And that may be through a methods advancement, or that may be by substantiating a new idea And so we really rely on some of the guidance that they're offering to us. And then we also make some of our own judgments by looking at other features of the paper, what the eventual application might be, because we can ask interesting questions of the authors about the gap between the basic stage and the applied stage. And we think that there are interesting stories about that space as well.
Great, thanks for answering that. So I have another question for Olivia. It could actually be for both of you, but we could start with Olivia. So a question was asked, so putting forth a pitch sounds like a great idea, and based on the examples shared, it is effective. But how do we identify opportunities for authors to find the right pitch for that exact outreach scenario? Say, we talked about the public, press, some policymakers, as well as peers. What would be a key step in starting that communication process?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's true. You really do have to be aware of what audience it is that you're working with. And again, places like AAAS and AGU try to both provide a lot of resources to help you think about audience and what their concerns and values are and how they differ from one another. And also, I'm sure at AAAS, as with AGU, if you're working, with our public information officers about some research that you're doing that's being published in a journal, they're going to help you work through that for a journalistic audience. Meagan was talking about some of the things that make a study interesting to journalists and to their audiences around things like, is there a personal story? Is there something exciting around the background of the methods for this that you haven't thought of? In addition to the study itself, like superlatives that are the newest, the best, something surprising, etc. And again, we can sort of help you either directly if you're working through one of our press offices, or through the resources that we try to provide to think about what your audience is going to care about. And the public is in some ways the hardest because they're not a monolith, right? There are lots of different publics and everybody cares about different things. So you really want to think about what group you're talking to. And as best you can, think about what interests and concerns and values and missions they might have within that group or community.
Thank you, Olivia. Meagan, do you have any ideas to share on that?
Yeah, I echo everything Olivia said. That's great. And something that we have done too is ask authors to tell us which outlets they like to read. And then we assign them a little bit of homework. Go and look at what, as you were saying, Olivia, what those outlets value, the framing that they are interested in communicating on that topic, and see where your study would fit in with what they've been focused on. And that sounds like a lot of work, but can actually be a fairly quick study and a really clear guide to scientists.
Great. So another question. I know, Meagan, you briefly touched on, just some of the COVID response that AAAS has been doing. But Olivia, has there been, more of an opportunity or a threat to your program, maybe in terms of like the data behind climate change going on with COVID-19 and how to communicate that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there's been a threat. I mean, certainly there are challenges, right, for everybody now who's in the sphere both of doing research and communicating about research, because we can't be in person with people. And that poses some of its own challenges, right now, much less, as Meagan was talking about, the importance of accurately communicating the scientific research that's being done on this topic to make sure that, we're not sensationalizing something that's so critical. But definitely some of what we've seen from our members, many of whom are climate scientists who've dealt with fighting misinformation for a very long time, they've felt a lot of sympathy for and empathy for epidemiologists right now. And certainly if you follow any, on Twitter, you may have seen various climate scientists, saying, sorry, we know what you're dealing with, to epidemiologists, because they're having to combat that same sort of vast wave of misinformation that really is attached to, again, going back to audience, what kind of values people hold, much more than what the facts actually are. And so what people want to kind of cling to, let's say, in terms of the information that they have. So a lot of the techniques that are useful in climate communication to reach audiences who might be less receptive, I think can also be valuable to learn from now.
Yeah, that's very true. So we're running a little bit out of time, but I wanted to get a quick comment from both of you on what advice would you give a society or a researcher right now that might say, you know, why does all this matter? Why not focus on funding and other areas of importance? Why focus on publicizing my research? Any lasting advice for those populations?
I would point them to the last slide of my presentation, which enumerates all the impacts, you know, from increasing collaboration that you can do in disciplines you may not have thought of in an ever more increasingly interdisciplinary world. And you likely will increase your chances of funding. You will understand your science better and its value to the public, which will, you know, propel you, as Olivia alluded to before, back into it and keep you there as a motivated investigator.
Olivia?
Yeah, Meagan, that was extremely eloquent. Thank you. I'd only add, nothing bad is ever going to come of your being able to communicate clearly about your work to more people rather than fewer.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much to everybody coming out to this session, and especially thank you to Meagan and Olivia for sharing a lot of your really great society initiatives, just connecting these different populations and communicating science to these people in different ways. I think this will be incredibly valuable to many people.
Thank you.
And on that note, hope you guys enjoyed the next session and have a great day.